South African consumers continue to be under pressure on the back of the higher cost of living, made worse by the fact that on average wage increases have failed to keep up with inflation. To try and cope with the lack of financial resources, many households have resorted to taking on debt. And as the cost of servicing debt has steadily risen with the imposition of higher interest rates, this is also putting more pressure on consumer pockets. Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined by Grant Heyman. He's marketing coordinator at the NDA. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. So ahead of the COVID pandemic, the household consumer debt to income ratio had steadily been improving. So how have you been seeing the consumer debt story evolve since the time of COVID?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. If we take a look at the time period from 2020, which was COVID, up until now, one would think that the debt circumstances would have increased or bettered from then, but that is just simply not the case. It has drastically worsened our economical state, and there's a huge reason why that is. Before 2020, the people that applied for loans and accounts were semi in a good mindset, in a good space financially to do so. But now, 3 years later, COVID is still having an impact due to job loss that happened back then, due to companies that had shut down, and of course, major salary decreases within their lives. So one thing that we take a look at here at National Debt Advisors is what those incomes look like, what the household circumstances look like. And we're just simply finding that people are not having enough money even to make ends meet in this day and age.
So, Grant,
fortunately enough, 3 years after this COVID period, debts are now becoming prescribed.
Grant, I wanted to ask you, anecdotally, we've continued to hear of people taking on credit in order to buy the basics, in order to buy food, which is not exactly sustainable. What does that say about the formal credit sector? Does this suggest that financial companies are not really, they're not behaving in the way that the National Credit Act demands, that they must lend money when they know that people can afford to pay back the debt? Is there a level of irresponsibility that's taking place in the marketplace?
Well, basically, if you take a look at your counselling sector specifically, we'll quickly take a brief look at prescribed debts as well. How the counselling sector works. First of all, they would need some form of income, the consumer now, in order to apply for this sector. And that's why we're still seeing a decrease in consumers applying for the relief measures due to no form of income or decreased salaries. What a counsellor does in a nutshell for the consumers, they go and take the debts that they owe, installments, combine them all into a singular lowered installment, and that would then have to be paid back to the credit provider from the consumer side. Then, of course, you have the interest rates that are decreased, which is legally done by the counsellor themselves, and all of this is being done legally by Section 86 of the National Credit Act that the NCR implemented in 2005. Now, counselling is one form of assistance, the main one in our country, but you also have prescribed debts, as mentioned, that is now being implemented after this 3-year term, but it's not for everybody. So, in a nutshell, the Prescription Act was implemented in 1969 and it's number 68. So you get two sets of prescribed debts. You get your unsecured facilities, which would of course be your retail stores, your credit cards, your personal loans. And in a 3-year term, if the consumer has not paid, if the credit providers have been making no efforts to collect funds, issuing legal action, anything of that sort, no form of communication, that means that those debts are now eligible for prescription or that they have become prescribed. But you also get longer-term loans like bond. And the rules that apply are different because this is now a 30-year term before it now qualifies as prescribed. So counselling, on the other hand, is not going to be for those seeking their debts that might have become prescribed. This is more going to be for the consumers. Living expenses are extremely tight. We can see that they are facing those financial challenges. And of course, if they meet 3 basic structures of criteria, we will most certainly be able to assist them and give them the financial aid that they need.
Thanks very much, Grant, for giving us that perspective on what's happening in the national debt counselling space. That was Grant Heyman. He's from the National Debt Advisors.